All right, now pleased to welcome into the Ryan and Goodman podcast none other than Worcester Academy Hilltopper, Rick Carlisle, class of 79. Is that correct, Rick?
It is. You've got a good memory.
I don't have a good memory.
Not many people know that.
I just knew I spaced it together with the fact that I knew you started at Maine in 79. So my brilliant math skills allowed me to figure that one out.
That's very good. That was good.
Yeah, you know, Worcester Academy's got some NBA alumni. Mike Malone went there. Donnie Nelson went there. A few others. There's a son of former Spurs owner Angelo Drosos. His son, I think John, went to Worcester with my brother Bill, who came a couple of years after me. So there's some lineage there.
Quite a few. Craig Smith, who went to BC, was played in the league. He was a Worcester Academy guy, and we go way back. When I was at BC and myself, we had a very noted Worcester Academy guy, Steve Alleman, who was a really great shooter for us. Anyway, Worcester Academy, yes.
You didn't know about Rick, Bob, when he was at Worcester Academy? You didn't go down to the hilltop and do a big story on him?
No, I guess I was occupied. That year they had some guy named Bird. I don't know. I never know whatever happened to him. So anyway, what life is, shall we say, capricious right now, Rick? I mean, day to day, you just have to look at every day and hope there's no bad news in terms of what.
Yeah, I mean, having gone through this now for the better part of 9 months, and dealing with the NBA on all of this, the preparations going into Orlando bubble restart, the preparations for this season, the level of meticulous care and preparation to detail, coming up with medical protocols that aren't necessarily able to simulate the Orlando bubble situation, but they're trying, and so far with reasonably good success, to create like a traveling bubble that teams are in. And so to this point, there hasn't been any tremendously crazy stuff, and we'll just keep hoping for the best.
Yeah, well, it's a crazy world. We all know that. So you're so far so it's the season, and this little snapshot that we have of the season. How do you feel about your team right now?
Well, I feel better. In recent games, we're playing better. We're defending better. Our makeup is different this year. We have more defensive players. We don't have the same top to bottom shooting, with the loss of Seth Curry, but also Porzingis hasn't played yet. And Porzingis adds an element of shooting and spacing, at 7'3", that's extremely unique, to say the least. So, we're hoping it's a matter of days, not weeks, before he's able to kind of crawl back into the lineup and work his way back in. But games are hard. Everybody's playing really, really hard. We have 13 of 19 on the road to start the season. So I can't imagine anyone has a harder schedule. Our first 6 days of the season started December 22nd in Phoenix. Then we went to LA. So we totally missed Christmas. And from the 22nd to the 27th, we were on the road, and then, and then came back, and, and so played a couple games, and we're back on the road again. Now we got, we're 2 games on the road right now. We're back at home for a day and a half, then we leave for Denver tomorrow. So a lot going on. Yeah,
absolutely. And your prize prodigy looks like he's continuing on his path nicely, Mr. Doncic.
Yeah, he's doing well. His start to the season was challenging. He was one of many players that had gotten the word pretty early on that, hey, this thing wasn't going to restart until January or February. So he was, he didn't have his preparation and conditioning back home to where it needed to be when this thing started back up December 1st. And so, but he's fighting through it, I don't know when this will be out there, but last night we played in Houston and he had a 33-point triple-double. So he's he's doing better. And, this guy is a very special player.
So I want to know, Rick, we see him on the court and he's smiling, but he's a killer. You could tell, like an absolute killer. What are his practice habits like? Like what is he like when we don't see him, but you do? Is he the same way? Is he smiling, having fun, yet very professional and also able to kind of have that killer instinct in practice?
Well, he's a competitor, and his practice habits each year continue to get better and better. He's a young guy that likes to compete. So when we're doing stuff where there's, 5-on-5 competition, or we'll have some kind of a prize for winning a drill. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Jason Kidd that way. And if you come up with a drill to try to simulate something, Kidd and Doncic are guys that will figure out the best possible way to manipulate the drill to, like we had a thing one day where, you had to make at least 5 passes before you got a shot. So his adjustment to it was to throw it back and forth to the center 4 times in the backcourt. And then now we can play, and so, look, this is what great players and some of the real, savant thinkers that we've seen in the history of this game. You're talking about guys like Bird, like Magic Johnson, Jordan, was very, very similar. LeBron James, I'm sure Kobe Bryant was a lot like this too. But as time moves along, the level of growth is really there in all areas, from skill refinement to leadership on the floor in games and in practice.
You mentioned Larry. I had to get to it because of the skill set comparison, the vision, the creativity that Luka has, and now you play with Larry at his peak. Absolutely. And when you came to the team, Larry was in the midst of winning 3 straight MVPs. He was at the peak of his game before his back set in and an elbow and all that stuff. So comparison in terms of what they bring to the game, what they see, what they have to offer to the game of basketball, Luka and Larry.
Yeah, many similarities. A sort of savant simplicity level of thinking, seeing things before they're going to happen. Both guys have the characteristic of at times becoming bored with the game and getting into a creative mode just to try to break up the monotony, which is a little challenging at the beginning of our season this year with the difficulty of our schedule and the fact that Luka's been catching up a little bit conditioning wise, but the great players that have the skill, that have the vision, that have the body type. And look, Larry Bird could have been a point guard in the NBA, and at 6'9", almost 6'10", he was the prototypical perfect power forward, a perfect small forward, during the entire 80s and a little bit into the 90s. And then he kind of changed over to the 4 position. But, Doncic is a good 6'7", without shoes on. He is, phenomenally strong, quick, and fast. But he is big. And people that were looking at film on him from Europe and trying to judge his level of physical ability and stuff like that, we're looking at games where he's playing against the international caliber athlete, which is a notch or 2 and sometimes 3 below NBA athletes. And so there were a lot of people that weren't convinced, but he gets anywhere he wants to on the court. And he just has the ability to make something out of nothing, which is very, very unique.
Yeah, that ability to get where you want to go. You got another guy that's a microcosm of that, Mr. Brunson. He gets where he wants to go, and yet he's not the greatest athlete on the floor or at his size, even, right?
But Brunson's a better athlete than people think, and he has but he has basketball athleticism. He has basketball speed. He has basketball quickness, and he has a great sense for the game. When Jerry Rice was coming out of college, he didn't time particularly well in the 40, but if you hear his interviews and hear him talk about, he knew he had football speed, and he knew that he was going to be a guy that meticulously was going to learn to run routes, and he was going to really conquer the detail aspects of the game, which would improve his quickness, even if it wasn't a measurable type thing. And Brunson is much the same way.
So I want to go back, Rick. I know Bob wanted to go to Celtics. I want to go even further back. I have a weird question for you. You played for Terry Holland at Virginia. Why did Terry Holland retire from coaching as early as he did? He was like at an elite level. Like, I think he went to an Elite Eight his last year or second to last year coaching. Do you know the answer to that? Because it's so rare these days that somebody quits at 48 years old. It shocks me.
I do know the answer, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's
okay.
It's something that would be, fair to his integrity as a person. He never talked about it. There were some things that weren't sitting well with him, and I think it's best to just leave it at that. But he was at Davidson. I believe he played at Davidson and coached at Davidson with Lefty Driesell before getting the job at Virginia. And so there was an opportunity to go to Davidson, back to his home school, as an athletic director. He took that. He had a very good run there. And then, I believe he got back to UVA and in some capacity in the athletic administration there. And this past Father's Day, we had an amazing Zoom call with him and a bunch of guys, that played for him, including Ralph Sampson, guys from their 81 Final Four team, Lamp, Raker, all those guys, Ricky Stokes and a lot of guys that were, really, really helped make that program. So Coach Holland is still doing well. I stay in touch with him, on a very consistent basis. He and his wife, Ann, she has a podcast too, if you're ever
really.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Everybody's got one except me. But he's doing great. But I appreciate you asking that question.
Yeah, it was just one of those, Rick, where I've always wanted to know and never really gotten the answer. Maybe I should dig in and look into a story. The other one I have for you is Maine to Virginia. There are a lot of transfer ups now, guys going up a level. When you did it, was it rare? And you did it kind of seamlessly to some degree. When you look at it, you were good at Maine. And most guys, I actually did a study this past off season. Most guys, when they transfer up, and I know this was, 30 years ago, maybe longer.
Yeah.
I'm giving you the benefit. I'm trying to be nice to you with your age. But most guys, you cut their numbers in half when they transfer up. And for you, your production was about the same. And obviously you had a hell of a run at Virginia in your couple of years there.
Yeah. There was one person that was really very much responsible for my ability to transfer there and the success that I had there. And that was Jim Larinaga. Now, when I played at Worcester Academy, Larinaga was the head coach at American International College in Springfield. It was around the time when Mario Elie was going to be coming there.
Yep.
When I was in prep school, I was the prototypical Division II, prospect. 6'5", run around, dribble, make a play, make a shot. New England was looking. Division II New England was starved for guys like me, but my goal was to play Division I. Well, Larinaga, he watched me play. He thought that I reminded him, I think, a lot of the way he played when he was coming up. And he was at all of our games. I mean, he would come to all of our games. He'd want to talk. We have these conversations and stuff like that. But I was not going to American International College. I mean, if I was going to go Division II, it was probably going to be either Assumption or Bentley. Both of those programs were really high level Division II programs. But the one Division I school that was recruiting me was Maine, and they were really on the fence as to whether, you know, they thought I could really play or not. And interestingly, you know, when I talked to Skip Chappelle years later, you know, he and Peter Gavitt was his assistant, and they were recruiting me. They came to a scrimmage that we played against St. John's Prep, which is another Worcester school. And I remember seeing those guys in the stands and saying to myself, you know, I don't know how I'm going to play in this game, but these guys have got to see that I am like the hardest playing guy they've ever seen. And I just remember diving all over the place, you know, and after the fact, once I got there, and may have been a year or two later, you know, Coach Chappelle said to me, he goes, listen, he goes, we didn't know if you could really play or not, but that one scrimmage, you know, against St. John's, he goes, we just felt like, God, if there's a guy that's going to play that hard, I mean, how can this guy hurt our program? And then once I got there, you know, Maine was the perfect kind of setup for me. It was a kind of a Indiana, you know, Bobby Knight's type of offense, read, react, you know, shooter friendly, playmaker friendly, stuff like that. And yeah, I had a couple years there, and you know, after the second year, we were, you know, 2 games above 500 again for the second year. And I had told Coach going into the second year that, you know, if things weren't getting better, I was going to consider transferring. So what happened was Larinaga ended up at the University of Virginia with Terry Holland. Turned out he wasn't long for American International College either, you know, not that it's a bad place or anything, but Terry knew him somehow, and so he got to Virginia. And then, you know, when I decided that I wanted to leave, in those days you had to get a release from your school, and you had to call schools, you know, and so, you know, I had to go through some stuff to get a release. You know, Maine didn't want me to go. You know, it turned out, you know, when this happened, and I talked to some other players who had transferred, done the same thing. You got to threaten lawsuits and stuff like this, and then generally they come around, and that's kind of what happened. But they, you know, they finally said yes, and then, you know, I had 3 visits. I visited Providence, I visited Syracuse, and I visited Virginia. And Virginia, you know, had been in the Final Four that year. Providence was in a rebuild. Joe Mulaney had gotten there. I took a visit to Providence, and you know, and they were just trying to find anybody. And Gary Walters had been the coach. He was still involved with the school, and he told Joe, he goes, and Joe was an older guy at that point. I don't remember how old he was, but he had to be mid to late 60s. I went in there, and Joe was telling, you know, we went to lunch. He was telling me stories about coaching the Lakers, and, you know, giving West the ball on one side of the floor, and because of the zone defensive rules, standing in 4 guys at half court, and guys had to stay within 6 feet of him, and then West would just go one-on-one. This was fascinating stuff. And my second year at Maine, we had played a game at University of Kentucky, they were a top 1 or 2 team in the country. So I had this VHS film of me having a pretty good game at Kentucky, and I said, Coach, this is Coach Mulaney. I said, do you want to see? Here's a video. He goes, no. I heard you can play. I heard you're good enough. You know? So I'm like, oh man, I don't know about this. And then Syracuse, you know, I had grown up going to their camps for years. I worked their camps for years. I mean, they knew me, and then they all of a sudden were interested because, you know, they probably didn't want somebody that was kind of right at their feet to go somewhere else and maybe do okay. And so Virginia was really intriguing to me. I mean, I had been in Maine, which is, you know, as cold as shit. It is cold up there. My second year, it snowed 5 inches in May, at the beginning of May, you know? And so I got off the plane in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I mean, it was cherry blossoms and beautiful weather. And it was like Nirvana, you know? And then, you know, I had a wonderful visit, met all the guys, you know, met Sampson, you know, Lampraker, all those guys. And it turned out that Jeff Jones, who was the starting point guard, was going to be playing his senior year, which would be my transfer sit out year. And then I could possibly just slide right in it. They had a position kind of built for a player like him and me. And so, once they offered me the scholarship, it was an easy decision. And look, at that point, if I'm going to leave Maine, if I'm going to do all this, I'm going to go to the highest possible level and find out if I could do it or not. And Virginia was an amazing experience.
I got to ask you one more Virginia question, one more Terry Holland question. Can you possibly shed any light on something that I've heard over the years? Was it either A, Terry Holland had a dog named Dean, or Dean had a dog named Terry that was joking about that? Did you anything about their relationship that you could shed any light on?
This is another Goodman question that is a great question, but I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
I'm going to go there. You have too much respect for all the people involved in that question.
Okay.
We're getting Rick with all these questions. He's no commenting us on. I love it. I love it.
Hey, you guys have done your homework. I give you that.
Jeff, the answer is yes. And also, I'm intrigued that a guy from Ogdensburg, New York, I would think he would think Orono was like the tropics.
Well, Bob, it was actually colder than New York because where I was. I mean, you look at it on the map, it's actually further north and further east.
Yeah.
I mean,
is it further north?
You're getting really to the edge of the wilderness up there.
I've been up there. Yeah.
Different country.
And, back in those days, it was snowing a lot more back in those days. It doesn't snow as much now for, whatever it is, global warming or whatever. But I remember there was one trip we took from Orono down to Portland to play a game against somebody, and our bus had no heat.
Oh.
And it was 10 or 15 below. It was one of the most memorable, horrible experiences I've ever had. And that was another thing that kind of got me thinking transfer the second year too.
I don't blame you. Charlottesville's pretty nice. It's warm. It makes sense. So you're in your 13th year now in Dallas. How have you changed, Rick? I mean, what I always remember hearing about you was you were a tough MFer, for lack of a better word. You were tough. And I know last year, I think I even talked to some people around there and players that I know, and they said, listen, he's definitely mellowed over the years, no doubt. Do you have to? Is it age, or is it the way the game and the players have changed a little bit?
Well, that's a good question. It's, the level of good fortune that I've had, it's hard to explain. I go back to, and this is a true story, and this is nuts. But I was playing golf with my dad a couple of days before I went to Celtics training camp in 1984. I grew up playing some golf, and I just love spending time with my dad out there. And so I was hitting a few balls after we played one day, and I was leaving for Celtics camp the next day. I was driving. I think I was driving there, and I was hitting 5-irons. I'll never forget this. And I had one of those red shag bags where to pick up the balls, you kind of pluck them with that tube thing. And it starts to rain. Then I hear some thunder. And so I go out and start picking up the balls. And I bend over to pick up, one ball that I see. And all of a sudden, I feel something hit me in the middle of my back, just below my neck. And it shoots out into my fingertips. So it turns out I got hit by lightning.
Come on.
Yeah, I mean, that had to be what it was. And it was it was a very glancing blow or whatever.
Oh.
So, so one of the things that, as I look at my career, look, I wasn't even going to go to camp with the Celtics. I was looking for a job in like France or Belgium or something like that. I mean, they had won a championship in '84, and I was somebody that was, looking to just try to make money playing basketball if I could. Turned out that, the European market wasn't very interested in me. And so I went to Boston. First of all, I had to not get killed being hit by lightning. Went to Boston, met Bob Ryan not too long after. We had this training camp, which was really unique because, you know, two of the starting players weren't there. Henderson and Maxwell weren't there. All of a sudden there's 14 guys in camp, 4 rookies and 10 other vets. And like, I'm like in the starting second unit every single day, getting reps and then getting in these games. And then sure enough, game 2 at Worcester, where I've had a lot of history. Bob may even remember this game. We were playing the Rockets. I got in there, I had 18 points. Ainge started the game. He had 25. And all of a sudden, the organization, and Red was around a lot in those days, decided that, Danny could be the starting guard and that I could be a roster player. And so, Gerald got traded, for the pick that ended up being Len Bias, as most people are aware. And that was the beginning for me. And so I've seen a lot, and you get to this point, the level of gratitude and that I have just for everything, but I always had such great love and respect for the game. I think that was one of the reasons I got good breaks. I worked hard at it, but I was lucky. And there were a lot of people that did a lot of great things for me. The answer to the question is, I don't know if mellowed is the right word, but I've gotten smarter. I think all of us do. And if we don't, we're going to end up on our ass somewhere. I've been humbled too many times. As Chuck Daly used to say, I've made every mistake there is to make, and I'm going to make more. And I'm always going to remind myself of that. And look, another thing that has a really profound change on you is fatherhood. So I've got a daughter now who's 16. Somehow or other, she posts something on Instagram and gets 2,500 likes. I mean, you explain to me how this is possible. And it's not even basketball stuff or anything like that. But I've learned a lot from her about, today's generation. And you've got to be an observer, and you've got to be a learner, and you've got to always work on being a better communicator.
By the way, you playing the piano with her singing was awesome. Not good. You could just tell how cool it was for you. And she didn't seem embarrassed doing it with her dad. Like that was the best part.
Yeah, I had to talk her into it. She's got as you could tell, she's got a very good voice, and she's getting more into music. She's doing some of her own writing of songs. She's learning about chords and stuff like that. So yeah, no, it's really cool.
Your first NBA coach, KC, passed away recently. Your reflections on KC playing for Kim?
Well, I defy anyone in this world to go find somebody who has something bad to say about Casey Jones. I mean, this is one of the most legendary basketball men. I mean, you talk about the number of championships. I mean, you look at his coaching credentials. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame caliber coach. May have not have made it as a coach because he wasn't in it as long as some others. Maybe I don't know, but let's just put aside the fact that the basketball success is there at some of the most amazing, galactically amazing levels. This is one of the kindest, warmest human beings that was, categorically across the board, loved and respected by every single guy that was on those Celtic teams when I played. And in today's world of labeling and a lot of negative stuff that goes on, the warm, authentic memories of Casey Jones are things to make you smile.
When did you ever play the piano with him singing?
I did. One time we were at a luncheon, and I had learned "You Are So Beautiful," which was a Joe Cocker song.
Yeah,
that was one of the ones that he sang, and there was a link that went viral, with him. I think singing at the Parker House. Bob, you probably saw it. He was talking about.
Yes.
You get on there. He had the mic. He was talking, and it is so great. I mean, it is so great. I mean, this was you know, music and singing was one of the things that really lit him up to a different kind of personality. He was a very reserved guy, but when he got that microphone in his hand, he smiled, and he started singing. And his voice was spectacular. Not just good, but you know, really tremendous.
Yeah, I urge people to go seek out YouTube. It's really, really remarkable. It's really worth it. The game has changed. We know dramatically. The three-point shot has altered the whole concept of offense and defense. I understand that's a different world. So putting the three-point world aside, the Warriors at their best and all that with the one, have you ever seen a better team in the 85-86 Celtics? If we just acknowledge that the game has changed.
Well, of course I haven't.
No, I would trust. No, I would
What's
trust.
he gonna say, Bob? Come on, what's he gonna say here?
No. What's he's gonna see? I trust this man to be honest. But I mean, it's something of a leading question because you know how I feel. I've expressed myself 1,000 times. It's the greatest team of all time. And the trump card for me was no other team brought anything resembling a Bill Walton off the bench. And that was the trump card to me.
Yeah, and look, the team was an amazingly close-knit group of guys. You know, when KC passed, I sent the link out of the thing, the YouTube thing that you and I are talking about, Bob. And, you know, I sent it out to nine or 10 of the guys, including, you know, Parrish, Maxwell, Sam Vincent, Larry, Kevin, Danny, Kite, Seasting, Wedman, and talked to probably 6 or 7 of those guys, and McHale. And everybody was commenting, oh, wow, you know, just all these great things about KC. And so, you know, the camaraderie on that team was very, very unique. You remember the Christmas Day game?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that was a seminal moment because when we blew the 25-point lead at New York to a team that wasn't very good, you know, on Christmas Day on national TV, you know, the team, I should say the veteran guys got together and decided that they were going to give up drinking until we won the championship. And, you know, it was one of those group sacrifices that was really pivotal. That was, you know, that really told a story about the importance of winning in the 80s and the importance of your team being that team. You know, the Lakers Celtics rivalry of the 80s, it really spurned a great interest from the Pistons. Isaiah Thomas hooked into it. You know, Chuck Daly was the coach. I worked for Chuck a couple of years later on in his career and got a lot of really interesting, you know, stuff about those Detroit teams and how much they were, you know, really locked into what was going on with the Celtics and Lakers. And they starved for, you know, an insatiable appetite to be champions. I mean, to be in that conversation is, you know, having that ring. Because back in those days, it was, you know, the thing that all the great players would say is, you know, how many rings you got, motherfucker? I mean, that was the moniker back in those days, Bob. And you remember that because, you know, when you were riding on team buses and stuff like that, there was a lot of that stuff flying around.
Oh, sure, no question.
Bob, what was your favorite story of covering Rick? I want to hear something.
Well, I'll tell you, the game that year, I remember, you know, they won 67 games. And one I do remember specifically, Sunday afternoon in February in Los Angeles. And Rick Carlisle hitting that corner jumper. And he was a pivotal player in that game that day. So nobody can ever take that away from him. I can tell you that right now. And beating the Lakers in LA that day, I remember that very, very well. But,
well, you know, in those days, those teams were so close that, you know, whoever could sweep the series was probably going to have best record in the league. I mean, it would always come down to that. And that would determine who was going to have home court, you know, in the finals. And, you know, I mean, that was my second year and I had gotten into the rotation and had some decent games, but that was a really big moment for me because, you know, when I had 10 points in that game and I hit that shot against the shot clock, you know, over Worthy or whoever it was, I mean, that was the first time that Dennis Johnson, who I just, I had such regard for, as a player, as a talent, as a person. I mean, the stuff I was seeing on a night to night basis. The first time he ever acknowledged to me, "Hey, great game."
Oh,
it was like a huge thing. It was
Really?
like a huge
I
thing.
can
It was
believe
like,
that.
Because he never said that wasn't him.
it just wasn't really his personality to be a kind of a gushy type guy like that. But that was, it was just a moment where there was a little respect that coming that I had never heard from him and even a couple of the other guys. And that's what was such a big thing with those teams during that era was, what can you do to help us win a big game? Sure. Maybe it's like, I mean, Bob, you remember like Greg Kite going into some of those games, just to be a physical presence.
Oh yeah.
To try to, make it difficult on Kareem or somebody like that. And, we end up winning the game. I mean, these guys would be like, "Hey man, great job, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff." And that's what it was. And we were all starved to try to do something, to help the team, even if it's the smallest possible thing to move toward the possibility of a championship.
Yep. So
what is it like working for Mark Cuban? Like, give me your greatest Mark Cuban story. And I don't mean one when you were like, I don't know if you were ever in a club with Mark Cuban, but I've seen plenty of pictures of Mark Cuban in the clubs, with Chandler Parsons back in the day or whoever. I know they could get after it. I know Chandler. I've known Chandler for a long time. I love him. There's a guy who could get after it. What's your favorite Mark Cuban story?
Wow. Well, tough question. There's a lot of them. I think there's a perception, and I know there was a perception when I was talking to these guys about coming here that he's super involved, that he's a meddler, that this and that and the other. And when I talked to him about coming here, it was interesting. Terry Stotts and Dwayne Casey had sat out the same year I did in 07, 08. And I had talked to Dwayne about the possibility of working with me, if I got a job coming out of this little hiatus thing. And I had actually traveled to Seattle a couple of times because that's where he was living, to talk to him. Turned out that he and I had a lot of the same views of the game. And then the two of us, Dwayne and I, did a thing for the NBA of guys that were former players who were interested in getting into coaching. It was like a 2-day clinic thing, and Terry Stotts was involved because he was doing some stuff with the NBA having to do with referee oversight and stuff like that. He was always really interested in that side of it. So the three of us spent a couple of days together, and then I ended up talking to Terry. He came down to South Carolina and visited me at our place down there for a couple of days to talk about the possibility of working together if things kind of fell in line. And so the three of us on one day in the spring of 2008, we're in Indianapolis. Those guys came into town. We had 3 interviews. Donnie Walsh flew in. He was with the Knicks at the time. He flew in, very quietly and interviewed us at the airport in a private room in an FBO. And I had these guys with me, and we were kind of interviewing as a package, and then at 5:30 p.m., Gar Forman and John Paxson came over to our house in Indiana and came for dinner. And that was the second time I was sitting down with them. And then about 9:30 at night, Donnie Nelson knocks on the door, and I knew he was going to be coming. And we had just, I'll never forget it, we had just put mulch down on our landscaping. So it kind of smelled like a cow barnyard. And Donnie's from the Midwest, so he's at the door. He's got cowboy boots on and a John Deere hat and my wife Donna answers the door and he goes, "Smells like Iowa here." So he came in. We went down the basement. Me, Casey Stotts, and Donnie, and talked basketball for a couple hours. Turned out that I was the only guy that they were really interested in talking to. And so, things kind of got moving. And then the next day, Mark Cuban, who had been in Chicago the previous day because he was talking about trying to buy the Cubs at the time, he flies in, and we meet at a small hotel out near the airport in a little meeting room. And Mark walks in and he just starts talking. He just starts talking about the team. He starts talking about the league. He starts talking about Dallas, and it was like, and at one point I said, "Mark, listen, I just got one question for you. What if you were to find out that the team actually performed better if you weren't in the bench area?" Because this was one of the things, people were seeing him down there. He looked, so involved and stuff like this. And and he goes, "Oh, no, it's great. It's great because, we're on the road. People just heckle me. They don't even bother the players." So I knew that this was like never going to be a conversation. And so at that point in time, I ended up getting the job, and, I really just ended up saying to Mark right off the bat, "Look, I know you're close with the players. I know you go out and party with these guys some. I know you're going to be talking to them, texting them." I said, "However much you're involved, I want you to be involved even more. I want you to be around the team even more. I want you to be as many practices and games as you can. I want you to be in the locker room before the game, at halftime.
Wow.
I want you to see what's going on all the time." I said, "The only thing I ask you," and listen, I had never been like this, but it was clear to me that this situation was different.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
and that he was a very, very important part of it. I said, "Look, the only thing I ask is that if there's something that I need to know," I said, you gotta tell me." And so he said, "Hey, you got a deal." And look, as time has gone on, it's gotten harder to keep him around the team because he's got, he's turned into an international TV star, with Shark Tank and a lot of other things. And but this is still his baby. This is still his greatest love. And as we've rebuilt the team and all that kind of stuff, he lets us do our jobs. He's not nearly as involved and a quote unquote meddler as people may think or may want to think from the outside.
He's not meddling with like personnel decision, like is he giving you his thoughts sometimes on guys who should be playing more or guys who should be playing less and those things, or is it just conversations, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, I consider this to be one of the great things about working here for assistant coaches, because what Mark will do, a lot of times he'll go to the assistant coaches. He doesn't like coming directly to me with stuff a lot of times, although I encourage him to. But my assistants, I've always had coordinators. I have a defensive an offensive coordinator, and Mark will go to these guys and talk to them direct and ask questions and stuff like that. And as guys like Steven Silas and Jamal Mosley, have interviews for head coaching jobs. One of the things that I tell decision makers is, look, these guys have a much different level of exposure to, working with owners, dealing with ownership, stuff like that, and it's a next level type thing. And you gotta. But look, it was the greatest decision I ever made here was to try to involve him even more, because it built immediate trust, and he has such presence. And look, he's involved in all the decisions, but it doesn't mean that he's meddling.
Jeff, if you were to Google Ogdensburg, New York, under the category notable people, the first name that pops up ahead of Jimmy Howard, the goalie for the Red Wings and the Olympic team in 14, noted artist Frederick Remington, many people will be aware of this, is Rick Carlisle, the number one notable person on that list in Ogdensburg, New York. Just,
Yeah, I did not know that, Bob.
well, and so we're quite honored to have the most notable person from Ogdensburg with us today.
Before we let you go, Rick, before we let you go, you have to guess at whose jersey this is behind me.
Raging Cajuns. What team is it?
24. It's now Louisiana Lafayette. It was Southwestern Louisiana at that time.
Is it Rodman?
Nope.
Southwestern. Is it Pippen?
No. This is your time. This is your time. You played against this dude.
Southwestern Louisiana.
He was healthier before, right about when you got to Boston. I mean, Charles Barkley says he's the most talented player he ever played with.
Wow. Give me a hint.
Number 22 for your arch nemesis team, for the team you hated.
22. I don't know. Which team is that? Is it
The Sixers.
Oh, Sixers. Gosh. Andrew Toney?
There you go.
Boston Strangler.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I think
I grew up in Boston, Rick, as a huge. I just went against my dad. My dad loved the Sixers. I picked the guy that was like the anti-Celtic guy, so that was it. I loved Andrew Toney. I mean, he was
the
a killer.
most forgotten great player in NBA history.
Yeah, you know what? His health problems at the end of his career were tragic because, you know, a lot of people. He needed another 3 years of that level to really to be a historically great player. And it was sad, you know. And look, I wish that players in the 80s, you know, guys like Tony, guys like Larry Bird, McHale, you know, had the benefits of today's medical, you know, and performance people. You know, they just it's such a different world. The things that they can do to help athletes and NBA players stay on the floor and have longer careers. So.
Well, listen, we appreciate it. We've kept you long enough. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. And can you hold up the story that Bob Ryan did?
Yeah. This was. I knew Bob wasn't a hater when I saw this. It's showing up backwards on my Zoom screen.
Oh, it's good for us. It's
looks
perfect.
really
up.
A
looks
young
really
Rick
good to me.
Carlisle with hair,
Yeah, and Bob Bryan with dark colored hair.
with a
and
mustache.
a dash.
It's good stuff. Well, appreciate you guys asking me on, and all the best and good health.
Same to you.
Hopefully we'll see you in person at some point soon. All the best, and be safe, be healthy, and enjoy everything.
Okay, take care.
So much.